Roll call, Zashki here. Zashki here.
Baker here.
Birdo
here.
here.
Cox
Good
here.
here.
Excellent. I will motion that we approve the agenda as published.
I'll second that, Rob.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Comments, correspondence, concerns from the public, including any comments the public would like heard prior to the discussion between trustees, staff, and our representative. Hearing none, we'll move along to business item number 1, a discussion between village trustees, staff, and state representative Joel Kitchens regarding current state and county affairs that are of a particular interest to Sister Bay. And I will, at this time, turn over the floor to any trustees and staff with any questions who would like to start. Raise your hands if you have anything. Denise?
I have a list of 5 questions, but I will just ask one at a time so others may ask questions. I actually thought that you would give the floor to Joel and he could talk to us about things that are going on, but okay.
Well, would consensus be that you'd prefer Joel to have an open opportunity to speak to us first and then we ask questions?
I think that might be a good idea.
Okay, then that's fine. Let's roll that way.
Okay, start out saying, first having me right now, session, and I hate to tell people this, but we won't be back on the floor until the 1st of next year. But obviously there's still a lot to do, and this is a good time for me to meet with you guys because this is the time when we really get we collect ideas, we get a lot of bills written and have them ready to introduce when we start back in session next year. Sometimes it takes a while to get things done, so it's nice when we can have this downtime to sort of work on them a lot. This past session, I think there were several things I think that we were able to get done that related, really primarily to Door County. I think the short-term rental bill to make that, I mean, it's not perfect, but at least we have a means now of tracking down, who's paying the taxes. If we have probable cause, we can audit that and find out, again, where make sure the taxes are going to the right place. I think the Door County Tourism Zone, when they've done a better job than anybody in the state on tracking that stuff. And they had a binder about 6 inches thick of all the things that they found that Airbnb was doing wrong as far as, listing them in the municipality, wrong tax rate, whatever. So I think there's plenty of probable cause that they'll be able to go back now and hopefully get all their records. So that was one. Miles was on with the Pulse, allowing them to expand even more the areas where they could be the official newspaper, the municipality. They had the rest, didn't have Sturgeon County government, there, but now basically trying to think, of course, and you guys did a great job of that, and I'm glad we were able to get you at least a portion of that back. I mean, you guys really went out on a limb, I think, in doing. I guess those are the things that are in my mind right off the top of my head that relate particularly to Door County. I'm probably missing some but yeah, we can open it up to discuss, talk about it or whatever.
Well, Joel, I don't know if you can hear us okay, but we're catching about every 3rd word.
Oh, no, really?
Yes.
Wow. Let me try back. I was on my laptop and I couldn't get through, so I did it on the phone here. Maybe if I go on my laptop, I'll be able to do better. So sorry about that. I'll hang up and see if it'll let me on there now. I don't know what's going on. I normally have good internet here.
Okay.
1 second.
Well, hang on.
Janelle, you might just have to watch to see if you have to admit him when he wants to get back in.
Okay. That'll be down at the bottom of the screen, right?
If you just, yeah, watch towards the center of the bottom, it'll say if there's someone in the waiting room. Or if you open up the participant list on the side, then usually it'll be at the very top of that list and then an option to admit.
Okay.
But I did turn the security off, so hopefully that still works.
The scary thing is when Joel shifted positions before trying to connect my laptop, we heard more than every third word there for a couple sentences. There we go.
Boy, I'm not able to get on that. Are you able to hear me now at all?
Yeah, good.
Okay.
A
Then
little
we'll,
better, yeah.
okay, well, I'll stay here and I'm going to keep trying to get on. And if I get, again, I have, normally, I'm not sure what's going on, but we can do this then. And then if I get on with my laptop, it'll probably be better, but I'll keep trying that while we talk. But anyway, hopefully you caught at least some of what I said. Should I start over or?
I think we got I got the gist of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then why don't you guys, whatever you want to talk about, the things you want me to expand on, or if you have more specific questions.
I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago or when it actually was, sometime recently. And on the ballots across Wisconsin, there was a non-binding question pertaining to fair maps. And I was just wondering what the legislature has done with that overwhelming response.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously we didn't change the system for it, and we ended up, with we had a split government. So I think that the maps reflected that a little bit more. I mean, I have supported legislation. I think if it's done correctly, I think we could do it in a nonpartisan way. But that didn't go through. So we are still with the same system that we are. I mean, for my district, it makes no difference really at all.
Right, Door County, the peninsula is the peninsula. Can't gerrymander too much of that.
So yeah, so it is what it is. But that's where we stand now. And you probably followed the court cases back and forth, and we went one way and then another, all of that. But if there's anything else you want me to say about that or not?
Nope, just wanted to hear your
Take on
answer.
Yeah.
You had mentioned in the beginning one of the bills pertaining to STRs. I will not speak for the board. I will speak for myself and many of my constituents in the village of Sister Bay. And I don't know if you were representing us at the time. I don't think you were, but I could be wrong. When the legislature and the court cases stated that a single family home, as long as there's a single family in it, it's a single family. And the only restrictions that we could place on it would be for rentals, I think under 7 days. And I just wanted to share my opinion that decision from the legislature just took away so much local control of our own neighborhoods and what we thought was best for our individual community. We have put in a lot of time, effort, money, trying to come up with regulations that can address some of the issues that the village has. And I just think it was, in a sense, a really horrible thing to do, to impact all of Wisconsin, every community in this way. Some may think that it's fine. Personally, a lot of the people that I talk to and myself think that it's just ruining our neighborhoods. And so that's just my opinion. Don't need a necessary response, but certainly wanted to share that with you.
Sure. And, I hear it a lot, and I think that I do hear the other side as well. I think that there are some things that can be done, though, to limit that. And, so I would encourage, I think right now it would be very difficult politically to take that away, to backtrack on that. I just think, part of the problem is just that in an awful lot of the state, at least till now, people don't see it as a real problem. So it would be hard to get legislation put through right now when most of the representatives just don't see it being a problem. But there certainly are some areas where it is, and Door County's been at the forefront, I think, of a lot of that. But I guess I would encourage you to use the tools that you do have available to you. I think that, and I've talked with people. Hugh Zettel is a new county board member who's very interested in this from Sevastopol, and he and I have talked a lot. I would like to see the county do more. It'd be done at more of a county level. I think that with the septic systems, for instance, that a lot of these places they don't have septic systems that are built for a dozen people, yet they advertise for that. So that's one thing. I think the parking you can do things about, and have requirement for parking for all of the cars that are there, and certainly if you say that if you put a minimum on the nights that they can stay there. And you guys have not done that yet, right? Sevastopol has, but you guys have not done it. Is that correct?
We did it a couple of months ago. We finally passed an ordinance.
Okay, so what, a 7-day minimum or?
No, we did not put minimums on it, but there are things that, granted, most of the village is on sewer and water. There are some properties that are not on sewer and water, and there are regulations in there that deal with POWTS. And we also addressed parking, where a parking plan has to be presented, because we were having difficulty with people parking all over the street, blocking vision triangles on corners, etc. So we tried to address what we could.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly think the minimum nights is a huge deal. But I saw the difficulty Sevastopol had in passing that. And I heard from people on both sides of that, of course. So sometimes I wonder when people say, well, we should be able to just get rid of them altogether. It's like, boy, if it was that much trouble just to put a minimum nights on there, I can't imagine, how much difficulty it would be just to say we're not going to have short-term rentals at all. But I certainly think the minimum nights has a huge impact on how many of them there are. Because one of the big problems I see is that obviously houses come on the market that are halfway affordable. Somebody buys them up right away and rents them out. And then we have such a shortage of affordable housing in Northern Door that I think it has a huge impact on that. So I think that if you put that minimum on there, that certainly takes a lot of that financial incentive away for people to buy those things deliberately to turn them into short-term rentals. So, I mean, you know, if the village sees that as a big problem, I would certainly look at that. Now, I think down the line, we may be able to do more at the state. In fact, state level, you know, a colleague from Racine has been, I was supposed to get back to him. He wanted to talk to me about it because now they're starting to see problems down there. So I think as different places around the state start to see it emerge as a problem, then it's more likely we can go back and do a little bit more and give some power back to the, you know, to the local governments. But I think right now, politically, that would be a really, really difficult thing to do.
Hey, Joel, how is it politically challenging to give local governments when that's kind of the platform you guys preach as local government? So I manage vacation rentals, right? I wouldn't be for 7 day. I do see it as being a problem. We need to figure it out, but we don't really have a lot of tools. And I know you can say the 7 day minimum is one, but but that can't protect the neighborhood, right? We can't kind of carve out where they should be and maybe where they shouldn't be. So how do you at the state level not feel like it should be a localized issue? Because that shouldn't be controversial, right? Hey, let Sister Bay decide for Sister Bay. Let Rhinelander decide for Rhinelander. Like you guys preach that stuff.
Well, I think everybody preaches that stuff, and then everybody's very picks and chooses when they choose to think local control is okay, I guess. I don't disagree with you. I think that the zoning part of it and would be a big deal to be able to say, well, you have it in these areas, but not in others. I think that one of the big things that comes up, though, is just that basic fairness towards the business when someone is already established that, you know, we can't allow local governments, and I'm not saying they are in this case necessarily, although certainly those people that have already invested would say that you would be in saying, well, you can't exist anymore. So I think that's where the local control versus state control comes into it sometimes, is that we do have to assure the rights of people that they're not, you know, being abused by local governments. But it's a complex issue, and that's probably not a very adequate answer. But I'm not disagreeing with you. I do think with the zoning part, I would like to see that where you could carve out some areas and say, you know, we'll allow it in these areas, but not in these residential areas. But it's also really difficult now to go back, since so many of them have proliferated, to go back now and try to do something about it when people have made those investments, you know?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought it up. That was going to be my second part of this, on how whatever homes are coming on the market and the bidding war of not local people, not local families, not locals who are working in our restaurants and our hotels, are just being priced out of the market. A home right across the street from me a month or two ago, 2-bedroom, 1-bath home, fair market value was $128,000. There's no garage. The lot is of a decent size. Sold for $490,000. There were 4 cars there, 2 in the driveway, 2 in the street, and a pickup truck with a boat behind it parked in the front yard last week. Those are my new neighbors.
I mean, obviously the real estate market is insane now. Yeah, obviously local people, and it's not just people working in tourism, it's, you know, it's teachers, it's people in the nursing homes and that kind of thing that certainly can't afford $490,000 or whatever, you know, for a small house. So it's a huge problem. You know, I do think I applaud, you know, Gibraltar. We were able to get that bill done for the TIF district for them to be able to put in some hopefully affordable housing. And one of the things that they did, and Sturgeon Bay is doing it with some of the developments they've been involved in, is putting in there into the development agreement that they cannot be rented out. You know, so I think, you know, I think some of our communities are going to have to look at those kinds of things a little bit more carefully and make sure you put that in there, that they can't be rented out. Because obviously, like in Gibraltar, it wouldn't do us a whole lot of good if we built all these houses and they just got snapped up and turned into short-term rentals.
Is that a deed restriction that Gibraltar is doing or just wording in their ordinance? Because I don't know that that would necessarily hold up in court.
I think it's a deed restriction. Is
Okay.
my And with the condos in Sturgeon Bay that they're building, they put something in similar to that, just saying if you buy it, you cannot rent it out. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't think an ordinance could do it. You'd have to, and in both of those cases, the contractor was willing to do that. So
Okay.
for the contractor. What else is on your mind?
I'll ask you one, shifting gears a little bit. And Denise mentioned, how the housing market is not being beneficial or helpful to so many of the people who are the lifeblood workers of the community and the restaurants and stores, et cetera. In that accord, can you outline where things stand or may be changing in terms of the assistance that was extended to people with the state pandemic declarations and whether or not those run through the end of the year? There was a special heating assistance plan, pandemic support driven, Badger Care extension, pandemic driven. Are things like that automatically declared to continue through the end of the year, through the coming season, or is that all up in the air and yet to be determined?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is up in the air and some of it is federal. So I'm not going to be able to give you a very good answer. I know there were a whole host of different things with healthcare and everything else that were affected by that. The money that came into Wisconsin that the state had control over, we were one of the few states where the governor had complete authority over that. So in the legislature, we had no say whatsoever in any of that, and he wasn't very open to sharing any of that authority. So we were really left out of the loop on all of that, on how all of that, the ARPA money and all of that was spent. So with some of those programs, if you have specific ones, I can certainly check into it and get back to you when they will be phased out. But I would assume that they'll be coming to it.
That's fine. I just wondered if you knew anything, right off the top of your head. That's
Yeah, no, I don't have a great answer for you on that.
Thank you. Denise, did you have something else on your list?
I do, but I'll just save that for later. I'll let others talk.
Don, Janelle, anyone?
No, I have nothing.
No, nothing
Yeah,
for me.
Joel, I'm Chad here. Sorry, I'm in my automobile, which isn't probably the smartest thing to do right now. First off, I do want to appreciate your efforts on the Pebble Beach, getting that extra money our way. It was great. It's still a terrible system, in my opinion, that people can anonymously object to this money. Have you made any headway? Have you ruffled any feathers? Have you talked to any colleagues? I know a gentleman that's running for a Republican seat down in the Kenosha area, and he sent me this article about this Cedar Gorge on Lake Michigan that, one person anonymously objected. They were granted the Knowles Nelson grant, and this is a big project, and it's probably going to be shot down, like where this isn't going to be conserved. So can you shed any light on what these colleagues of yours are on the Senate side and the Joint Finance can we change the system? It's kind of really poor government and non-transparent government. Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, no, I think it is a terrible system. And the problem really has come in the Senate, not in the Assembly. And, where you have people sort of anonymously killing things. When I worked on Pebble Beach, and, the Assembly co-chair of Joint Finance, Mark Bourne, and I have talked about it a lot, and he agrees with me. And he was happy to see Pebble Beach go through. And he kind of said, well, yeah, that's the way it should be, that, a member should have an opportunity to go and make their case to those members that had objected, at the very least. I mean, but there are times when you don't even know who it was. So, we were fortunate, at least I was able to find out who the people were and to go in and have conversations with those and get it done. But It is a crummy system. And honestly, it's not just for like Knowles Nelson. Right now, one of the problems we're having is that there was money put in for the arts in Wisconsin. And joint finance has not released that money. And it's sort of the same kind of thing where you have a couple of the Senate members that are objecting to it, and it's not being dispersed. So I'm continually hearing from, whether it's Peninsula Players or all, a lot of the other art venues around the county, the frustration with that money's there and they're not able to disperse it. So I agree with you completely. I'll keep working on it. I'm not sure how that ever came to be that way, but it isn't a very good. It's not a good.
It seems to me if enough people like yourself get together on both sides of the aisle and bring attention to it, this could be an easy fix, right? Because I can't see it being political as to one party benefiting from this or not benefiting, because it's terrible, right? It hurts everybody. So I would really encourage you to keep working on this since you kind of have a little background and knowing our frustration with it. And again, I do appreciate your efforts though, because I know that we could have got the 249 that the DNR could give. So we're thankful. I appreciate it, but I would encourage you to keep going on this and change it for the next project and the rest of the state, because it's a good program. And just hearing what you're saying about the arts, it's a good programs, right? And the money's already there. It's not like it's not like it needs to be budgeted. The money's already there.
Right. Well, I'll keep working on it, but it's far from an easy fix though. And I will tell you that our frustration with the Senate in a lot of different areas, they have a lot of power because the split between the two parties is relatively small. So a couple of people, sometimes one person, can kill something. They kind of like that. So it's going to be difficult to get them to give up that power where right now they don't like a project, they can kill it, pretty much single-handedly. And so it's going to be tough to get them. I will continue to work on it. I promise you that, but it's just not going to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And again, I do applaud Sister Bay for doing that project and saving that property. I don't know that there's another village in the state or small government that would have taken that on, and where, from what I'd heard from, trustees and all up there, it was pretty much unanimous with the citizens of Sister Bay that was a good idea. Most places around the state, if you talked about taking on a couple $1 million in debt to save a property like that, you wouldn't be in office very long. So I appreciate that. It's a shame that it ended up being so much trouble. Luckily, we were able to get at least half of the money for you. But.
We're very lucky with the people that live in Sister Bay and their similar vision that matches the village boards.
Yeah, it's a unique area, and it's great that they were appreciative of. It's because it is such a beautiful and unique property there that they were appreciative of that and willing to pitch in to save that.
I've got another one for you, Joel. Quite frankly, I cannot say specifically what was behind about a year or so ago, maybe a little longer now, of the armed officer being assigned to Gibraltar School. My question for you is, with all the unfortunate situations escalating in the country, particularly at schools, would you consider what's in place with the armed officer at Gibraltar to be cutting edge for the state? When that was implemented at Gibraltar, did that in essence join with similar initiatives around the state? Or if you could just give us a little feedback on that.
Sure. What happened exactly at Gibraltar? I'm not familiar exactly with that, with the situation there. I was so I know what our experience was with that. But what happened at Gibraltar? Were people not happy with that, or did it not go very well? Or I'm not.
To
really-
my knowledge, everyone is happy. No one, to my knowledge, no one has said, gosh, it displeases us or we're against having the officer present. I can't say what drove it and I'm not, I guess my question is, were we part of, let's get with the state of Wisconsin, this is going on, or did we take a leading step forward? And, is there a feeling that what's going on at Gibraltar with the presence that's there under current circumstances, is there a feeling amongst, your fellow leaders that that's exemplary, sufficient, should be pointed to for the rest of the state to get along with, or?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't sure what the experience had been at Gibraltar. So when I was on the school board at Sturgeon Bay, we had a resource officer. And I mean, really the best thing about having that person there was that first off, you have to have the right kind of officer. Not everybody can do that. You need somebody that can relate to kids, can build relationships. And the best thing about having him there was that, and after that it was a woman, but was that they were able to build those relationships. And we headed off a number of things. I mean, nothing like a mass shooting, but there were some drug issues. There was a case where a teacher had an inappropriate relationship with a student, and they had kinds of relationships where people came to them and gave them a heads up on this. So we were able to head that off. And plus the other positive thing, and that I see for, particularly like in our cities where kids have never had a positive interaction with a law enforcement officer, if you have the right kind of person there, it is a chance to start bridging that gap and build positive relationships rather than them being seen as the enemy. So I think that really is an important part. I think a lot of schools are going that way. In Governor Walker's last term, we put $100 million towards the schools, both for resource officers and also for, it was a grant program, and 100 million is a fair amount, but it's not enough for everybody. But still, to put in security in the schools, as far as like, I think most of our schools in the county now have one entrance, and it's monitored, so that we can hopefully prevent some of these things from happening. I mean, obviously the gun control issue is a very thorny one, and we could, I'm sure, talk about that all night. But I think the things as far as school security and all, I think that is a really vital part of it. No matter what we do with guns, there's always the potential that, one disturbed person can go in and cause trouble. So I think the security is a big part of it. I think mental health is a big part of it. I wrote a bill a few years ago to allow counseling in schools. Prior to that, they were not allowed to do that, to have mental health counseling within the school. So, and I think a lot of our local school districts have taken part of that. But again, it's, no matter what we do, it seems like it's never enough. But, it's something we need to keep working on. But I'm glad Gibraltar does have an officer in there. Again, I think maybe all of our county schools do at this point. I think it's a very valuable thing.
And I like your point about the relationship building, because that's one thing that's clear with the officer who's been over there, is that she is clearly in the relationship building business. And
Yeah.
all the parents I know are very pleased that she happens to be the one there.
Yeah. And I think and I've gotten really good feedback locally from all of our schools on that, because I think both the sheriff's department and our local police departments, they understand that it needs to be the right person. You can't just assign any old person to do that. One of the things that came out in, I think Madison and Milwaukee perhaps both did it, when there was so much, the summer before last, when there was a lot of rioting and that kind of thing with all the Black Lives Matter movement, they took their officers out of the schools. And I think that was so short-sighted. I just don't think they understood what those people were there for. They were not there to be a military presence. They were there to build those relationships. And as a side benefit, you have an armed officer in case, heaven forbid, something actually would happen where that's necessary. The biggest part of it is just, building the relationships. So I thought that was an incredibly short-sighted decision for them to make. And I'm not sure if they've gone back to it now or not, but.
Denise?
Expanding on Rob's question, Joel, you said that gun control is a is a thorny issue. where, where do you stand on any kind of limiting regulation?
Well, I think that there are things that can be done that make sense, to me. It is a difficult issue. I think that the problem is that when I hear from both sides of it, they may as well be from different planets because they have no comprehension of the other side's position. There are an awful lot of people, and probably not in Sister Bay, but an awful lot of people in Wisconsin, because we have one of the highest rates of gun ownership in the country, that, they grew up with guns. That's a big part of their culture. And so they're very resistant to, their attitude would be, well, because there are a couple of nuts off in some other part of the country, why should my rights be infringed on? Now, I'm not trying to say what's right and what's wrong, but I'm just saying these are people that are good people that would never break the law and all of that we hear a lot from. So for that reason, difficult issue. When you talk to either side of it, they both seem to think that everybody thinks like they do, I guess. But again, I think that there are areas, I think that, limiting sales to 18-year-olds is certainly something that, I know they're having those talks on the federal level right now about, about doing some of those things. I think that it has a better chance if it combines with school security, with mental health, because I think that there's a lot of resistance to blaming guns, that we need to look at the other causes. And again, as I said, no matter what we do with guns, there's always going to be the potential of one, disturbed individual going into a school and shooting, or going anywhere and shooting. So I guess
Okay,
that's
more specifically, my father has multiple guns. They happen to all be rifles. He has hunted his whole entire life. He was born and raised in Northern Door. Although he's now 85 years old and doesn't hunt much more. I have been around them my whole entire life. I have no problem. I guess I wanted to hear something a little more clear and concise from you on the assault weapons. I know that it's a huge issue with the federal government and why they can't do more about background checks, and I know that they are just overwhelmed, and I could be wrong, but what I thought I heard is that there's only somewhere between 3 and 5 days, and if ATF or whoever it is that's in charge of reviewing those background checks, if they don't get back to the gun store or whatever, then they're automatically allowed to sell that gun to it. Is there just something more that the state can do? Because on some of the less controversial aspects pertaining to guns, I mean, there have been plenty of polls that say the majority of Americans do want background checks, closing the loopholes, etc. And I guess what bothers me is pertaining to something that you said earlier, and about these anonymous people not wanting to give up the power. Power should have nothing to do with government. We, as a 7-member village board, do not do it for any kind of power. We try to represent and listen to our constituents, have all the facts and figures to make rational, common sense decisions. So where do we go from there statewide?
okay. Well, there's a lot there to unpack. And when I say power, I'm not sure that it's power to get done what they think should be done. It's not necessarily the personal power, but just that ability to steer things in the direction that they want to. They don't want to give that up. On the guns, I certainly think background checks are something that we should be able to have bipartisan agreement on. We tried to do some things in the state a couple of years ago, as far as, there are several different databases around, and sometimes those databases don't communicate with each other. I had That,
We just lost everything, the last 5 sentences or so that you said. You totally went blank.
sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, again, I'm not sure what's going on. I should try to launch this thing again, but I'll try this one more time, see if it'll let me on that. No, still not working. Anyway, I'm not sure where I left off. I was going to say, I think on the background checks, though, I think that is an area where we should be able to have bipartisan agreement, and I hope that the federal government does in this compromise bill that they're supposedly working on right now, and they're hoping to have by the end of the week, that we can have something with that. One of the problems has been that we have different background check systems and they don't always communicate. And so things fall through the cracks. There was a church shooting, I believe, in South Carolina a few years ago where the individual that did it had an issue when he was in the military, and that should have prevented him from buying weapons. But because that database didn't communicate with the other database, it didn't sound the alarm, I guess, and he was able to purchase guns. So that's kind of thing is unacceptable. And so I think we definitely need to do more with the background checks. As far as stopping the loopholes, some of those would be relatively easy to stop. The one that gets a lot of attention, the gun show loophole, and I'd vote for that in a minute to do that. And in fact, I have, but to be honest, it doesn't really do a whole lot. I think it's going to give me a chance, it looks like, to get in on this, but maybe then it'll work better. Just 1 second.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hey, yeah. Okay, I got off of that one.
Oh, so much better.
Okay, hopefully this one's better. I don't know what happened to my internet tonight. But anyway, like I said, I forget where I was, but and now I can see you guys even.
Gun show
anyway,
loophole won't do much, is what you said.
Yeah, the gun show loophole, people that commit crimes just don't buy their guns in gun shows. When you look at it, it's like 0.05% or some such thing of the crimes committed where they actually bought there. The real problem is that for criminals, they're not buying them legally anyway. So they're not going through the background checks. The vast majority of crimes are committed. They're bought from other criminals. They're stolen and that kind of thing. So that is where it gets to be very difficult. Now, these mass shootings that we've had, that's a little bit of a different story, where those were actually purchased through the legitimate market. But, when you look at the crimes committed elsewhere, and I mean, what did we have, like 19,000 murders last year, I think, in the country? And, those are overwhelmingly committed with guns that were purchased illegally. So whatever we do with background checks and stuff, it doesn't touch that,
But isn't just taking one step at a time, if the majority of Americans want this, you want to believe all the different polls that are out there, isn't that working for the constituents?
Well, yeah,
And I'm not just talking about you, I'm talking about everybody.
Right. Again, we'll keep working on it. I hope that the federal government I hope they're able to do something with this bill they're coming up with it and have a true compromise that includes some of those other areas. So, we'll see what happens. But I mean, we're not going to be able to ban like assault weapons on the state level. That's just not going to happen. But, we'll see what they do on the federal level, I guess.
Could it be done, for instance, Joel, on the state level? Does the state have the authority to say you cannot buy a gun in the state of Wisconsin until you're 21 years old? And I think if you look at the preponderance of the school shootings, not just recently, and to your point about, unfortunately, the mental health aspects that go along with the vast majority of these shooters doesn't get caught on to quick enough. If we would stop letting 18 and 19-year-olds buy any kind of a gun, which includes assault weapons, which includes any kind of gun they want, how much, it's hard to understand how simple it is to just, not to just say, hey, if you want to buy a gun, you can buy a gun when you can buy a beer, period. And then the system would have time with how many individuals out there for their issues, that they do have, that doesn't include gun ownership to surface, and maybe from a mental health standpoint, et cetera, or a law enforcement knowledge, we'd be in better position as a society to say, okay, we stopped some people from buying guns that shouldn't have been able to buy guns 2 or 3 years ago. Does that make?
Well, I mean, I think I do believe it's possible, because there are, I don't know about states that say no guns whatsoever, but I'm not sure about that. But there certainly are states that don't allow, assault type weapons to be sold to 18-year-olds. So, I mean, that's something that could be done if they're, again, there are a lot of people, though, that are opposed to those types of regulations. So I think politically it is going to be, very difficult to do. And I know people hear a lot and they say, oh, it's the gun lobby, that they throw all this money at these politicians and they're bought off. I don't think that's really the case. The NRA at this point really is not that powerful financially, but there just are more people than you would maybe realize in Wisconsin that really value their guns and feel like, well, this will be the first step, and then they're going to do something else, and they're just very, very fearful of that. So politically, it's very difficult to get anything done on guns. Parents
are also fearful of their children dying.
Yeah, certainly they are, and I get those. I get lots of communication about that, but I get them from both sides. Just saying politically, especially in Wisconsin being such a heavy gun owning state, it's going to be very difficult. I'm just being realistic with you.
Joel, the people I know that own guns, there's very few of them, and there are some, but there's very few of them that would have any problems with significant background checks. Make it really hard to get it. Getting rid of assault rifles. Almost every sportsman I know sees no point in them. I'd venture to say I understand that guns are part of the culture, and that doesn't bother me. But I don't know the gun owners that you do that would like get assault rifles. We need 18-year-olds to buy these things when they're playing video games, shooting people up all day long. I don't know those people, and I know a lot of people that vote conservative that own guns. So I just think it's just a weak argument to say that. It's not trying hard enough. Yes, there are a lot of people that have that view that, oh, if you do this, they'll take more. But that's where good leadership comes in and expresses, well, we got to inch ahead at this, and we got to do it smartly. And we do have to take away more, because kids are being slaughtered in schools. I mean, it's an embarrassment to be an American right now for that purpose. Not for every purpose, but for that purpose. So these vanilla answers by you just are hard to understand, because I don't know a Republican that owns a gun that I'm friends with that would have any problem with this stuff being regulated. And I know a lot of them that feel that way too, because they're in our same community.
And Chad, to your point, Chad, the interesting thing in all this is I've never seen one news report after one of these school shootings where there was complete lack of understanding of how it happened, because the shooter had been brought up in a culture with responsible hunters in their family. And so I think we are fortunate in the sense of the traditions in Wisconsin and in parenthood in Wisconsin that accounts for a lot of, yes, that's why so many people have guns like you're talking about, Chad. But, could it be started to just say there's, if you want to buy an assault weapon in Wisconsin, you have to be 21. I mean, is that something that would fly, Joel? Something like that, to just take a first step of saying, okay, you know what? These weapons here, while the rest of the country or the federal government figures out what's going to happen with this, we're telling you, here's what's going to happen in Wisconsin. You're not going to buy one of those if you're 18, 19, or 20.
No, I certainly think that that's a more realistic goal. I think that's something that has potential. To just say that we're not going to sell, you know, that type of weapon anymore, I think it's going to be very difficult. But I think the 18-year-old thing, I sometimes think we need to separate out the true mass shootings, which are, and it's all depends on your definition, but the true mass shootings of, you know, an anonymous shooter going into a school, going into a department store, or whatever, that's very different from the vast majority of murders that we see. And we are an outlier in the world as far as gun murders overall. Clearly we are amongst the developed nations. But on the real mass shootings, those have happened everywhere. We're not such an outlier when you take our population into account. I think the 5 greatest mass shootings in the world, none of them even happened in the United States. So that's a different problem almost than just than the murders that we see that are mostly domestic, they're gangs and that kind of thing, you know.
And I think that's understandable. And I think any fair, reasonable person can recognize that it is not, the mass murders are not the majority of the crimes, the gun crimes that happen or the murders that happen. But it's still a step. It's still something.
It's just like, I guess my point is that of those real mass murders, again, that as I described them, and that's depends on what definition you go with, but they've averaged since Columbine something like 24 deaths a year in the United States, which, and God knows I watched the news tonight watching, the Uvalde, and it's completely heartbreaking, and I don't want to at all minimize that, but you compare those 24 to where we've been averaging over 15,000 gun murders overall, but yet we only get attention when it's one of the, when it's this type of shooting, it seems. That's when we hear all of the calls about it. So I think there's a much bigger societal problem that we're dealing with than just that.
Don't disagree there. But like I said, it's just baby steps to show that you're finding compromise with people. You're taking a step. Maybe there's compromise on something else down the line. That's all I'm saying. So.
Anybody else have a thought on that or different subjects?
Yeah, I have a very uncomfortable final subject. So we still don't know what's going to happen with the Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade. And Wisconsin is one of those states that has an archaic 19th century law that prohibits all abortions. There is no exception for victims of rape or incest. And I find that appalling. And I was wondering if there has been any discussion on the legislature changing that law, abandoning that law. Where are we?
Yeah. Well, I think obviously we're still waiting to hear from the Supreme Court. I think that there's certainly some question as to whether that law is going to hold up legally. So that's going to be a big question there.
Why
and yeah,
would
you're
that
right.
be?
What's that?
Why would that be? Whether that law will hold up?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been told and I've read from sources on both sides that it will certainly be challenged whether that law would be legal. So it's not a sure thing that law would hold up. That'll be one of the, if they throw out Roe versus Wade, that'll be one of the first things that'll happen in Wisconsin, will be that that'll be challenged, that law. So then we'll have to see from there. I think that there are most of us, I shouldn't say most of us, probably most of us, in the Republican caucus too, that would support putting in certainly an exemption, at the very least, put an exemption for rape and incest in there. Now, if it's, you know, I mentioned that about the Senate in particular, where sometimes a couple of people can kill things. And so politically, even though maybe the vast majority of people are on a certain side of it, I can't promise that that would happen. You know, one of our leaders in my caucus proposed that we come back in November and add on the exception for rape and incest at that time, you know, before the next session even starts. But I don't know how it's going to play out politically. It's going to be difficult.
Would that be something that you would support?
Yeah, I would support that. And I've always said that I support that. I'm pro-life, but I also have authored the bill to make birth control more accessible. I definitely want to give people, opportunities to, to not have that be, what happens. But, and rape and incest, if it were my kid, I don't want to be involved in that decision. I'll let other people make that decision, certainly. But
Right. I mean, we're at a country that is at a mental health crisis right now. And if a lot of these states just don't allow this, the magnitude, the people's lives, the impact that will not just by if Roe v. Wade falls, but not having that exception. And if an exception is not made, then what is the state going to do to mentally support the survivors of rape and incest? Where does the money come? There's a lot of nonprofits out there, but if the legislature, I am pro-choice, you are pro-life, I think each individual can make that decision for themselves, and that's where I disagree with a third of the country, that what works best for them, what their belief system is, what their life system is. But there has to, if the legislature doesn't do anything about it, then you got to put money to it.
Well, if it ends up, if that law holds up and we're not able to change it and all that, there still are other states or neighboring states where an individual can go, and there are already groups that are talking about, providing funding to allow people to go to those states. So I don't think it would be something where they absolutely would not have that opportunity. Maybe not ideal, but that is a part of it. So
just for the record, I just want to say that 1 in 3 women in this country have experienced sexual violence. That's staggering. A third of all women. Miles, be happy you have 2 boys.
Well, I guess I won't comment on that, but again, abortion and gun control are the 2 worst issues to talk about, because they're such, it's hard to find, common ground on those 2 issues. So they're the 2 issues I like to talk about, I guess, the least.
Sure, and I understand that, but I also had to bring them up as.
Oh, no, I don't mind. That's fine.
You being my representative and knowing what you might be willing, what steps you might be willing to take. Would you be in favor if something came up in the House?
Sure. No, it's certainly all fair game. I'm just saying it's not something I deliberately bring up personally. I read an article though. I read an article recently about, just how abortion has been handled in Europe, because they've never had the benefit of a court case saying you have to do it this way. So they have all done it essentially the way all of our various states will do it now. And there's great variation in all of the European countries. I think Poland has the strictest abortion rules because it's a very Catholic country, but there's none of those countries where it's 100%, illegal to have an abortion. And, I think if Roe versus Wade is thrown out, it's going to be that way in the United States, where we're all going to probably have our different rules. And in Europe too, they have that option of going to other countries, if they need to, I guess. But
Yeah, I just really want to make sure that this is not that Republicans as a whole, or I guess I need to use that term, are not just a pro-birth, and that there are services and funding available to take care of those mothers, of those children, as they grow and go through the system. Now, I know that there's WIC and there's some other programs out there also, but, and yes, people can go to other states. And I think the funding that some of these organizations are talking about will help, because it really will affect low-income women the most, and who cannot take time off of work and travel and jump through all the hoops that some states have about going twice and having a waiting period and et cetera, et cetera. I just, if this is where the country is moving, then we need to have the social services in place to take care of those children once they're here, not just when they're in the womb. Be concerned about them. That's all I have to say.
Sure. I will say in the United States, over the last 20 years anyway, abortions have been dropping very steadily. And, again, I bring up that birth control bill that I had, which has now passed twice through the assembly. But again, a couple of senators have killed it so far, but I'd like to get that through. But, I think that, that type of thing is, it's really important. I think that we make birth control very accessible. Along with addictions, I think unplanned pregnancy is the biggest factor to lock women into, that generational poverty, where every one generation after the other is locked into poverty and dependent on government. So I think that having access to birth control is a huge issue, and I'll certainly keep pushing on that, because it shouldn't all be just about abortions. And again, we've done a better job. I think, the increased accessibility of birth control is one of the main factors in the decline that we've seen in abortions in the United States.
Yeah, I think they were, when Obama was in office, I think I read an article that they were at their lowest point ever. And I don't know if that was with the ACA or something else that they did. I can't remember specifically what that was. Yeah, I did.
And they've continued to drop since that time. It's been a pretty long, extended period of declining abortions, and I think that should be our real goal. And that's going to be
absolutely right, because I did read that in your newsletter, the 14 bills that you had highlighted in there that you had worked on, but 11 out of the 14 failed to pass pursuant to Senate joint resolution, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I think I had 8 bills that he signed into law this time, so that was pretty good. But that one's one that I've put a ton of effort into and have gotten very, very, very close. In fact, I needed one more senator this time, and I couldn't swing it. So we'll be back at it next time.
All right, excellent.
A couple of them leaving, so hopefully we'll get it done next time.
That's good to hear.
I got a topic shifter, Joel.
Okay.
And then Rob, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to depart because I do have to get on a trip. I didn't know. Is that okay if I?
That's fine.
All
Go
right.
ahead, Don.
Sorry
Thank you.
about that, guys.
Thank you. Is there any monitoring at the county or state level? Is there any monitoring on a monthly or weekly basis of gasoline sales? And, to where somebody might, from a gasoline sales visibility, be able to draw a correlation or put information out that would say, hey, for Memorial Day weekend, Door County had 25% less sales of gasoline at all the known pumps. The state of Wisconsin had such and such. And I asked that based on, in general, what I'm hearing from business proprietors supports what I've seen just on my own, going back and forth through town, going back even to of less traffic than what people can recall for the first weekend in June, for Memorial Day weekend. And the question being, from the beginning of this gas price hike, of, that a lot of business people have been asking each other, which is, are we most at risk of losing the day trippers? The people that wound up coming up for the day, found it to be so fabulous, and then decided to say, you know what, we want to relax and have a good time. Let's try and stay overnight. And I can tell you where I'm work, those calls are virtually non-existent right now from people on a Friday or Saturday wanting to stay over the same night. And then you see less traffic around. And I'm wondering if, if there's any, even going back to when we had the Door County, the Village of Sister Bay rummage sale, a lot of people commented how there just didn't seem to be as many people coming through checking it out. And then you wonder, well, are there people in Algoma and Kewanee and Green Bay that aren't going to make that drive with the prices? So I'm just wondering if there's any kind of study as to, gas sales.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of one. That would be one way to, I guess, monitor it, how many people are coming up. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I've not heard that yet about people feeling like the numbers were down. But a year ago at this time, everybody was thinking maybe Door County had overdone it. We had too many people up here and all that. So
I agree.
but so we'll see if I guess we'll have to see what impact that has. I mean, it would make sense to me that maybe the day trippers would decide not to do it because that's a lot of money to spend. And it's not even just gas prices, though. I mean, with inflation where it is right now, I think people are feeling more of a pinch than they did. And last year we also had I think there was an awful lot of pent up energy, of course, from the pandemic where people really wanted to get out and do something. So there might be a little bit of a rebound back to more normal this year. But yeah, that'll be, I'll try to check into that. I think the, Discover Door County probably would have some idea on the numbers that they're seeing, on the impact.
Yeah.
Rob,
Yeah.
as a gas station owner, I report my gallons to no one except the insurance company when I'm renewing my policy.
Okay,
So
good to know.
That's
There
what
is-
I figured.
Joel doesn't need to waste his time. There is no
Okay.
database.
Right.
Okay, good to know. How are your sales this year?
Okay, but I agree with Rob. This weekend was down, which is okay with me. Like many businesses, we are trying to operate a business that's open from 6:30 in the morning until midnight. And we have we're down an employee and a half. And so we're trying to do it with 4 employees and one of them is part-time. So it's exhausting.
Well,
And if there was housing, and if I could afford to buy, if I could afford, or my business be able to afford to buy a home that was in the $300,000 range, I would jump at it for employee housing, but outbid.
Yeah.
well, yeah, the employee situation is, obviously really extreme right now. And it's not just Northern Door, but yeah.
So if if you know of any kind of other money that the village can tap into for attainable, affordable housing, whatever term you'd like to use, we would sure be interested.
Okay. Yeah, we have done some different programs in the past to encourage, affordable housing. We had a package of bills last time that we passed. The governor signed a couple of those and vetoed some others, but just trying to incentivize people to build, affordable housing. But again, we need to make sure they get used as affordable housing and not rented out.
Yeah.
Well, and they need to be in the appropriate districts. I think I read about a bill that was going to mandate that they be in our downtown districts, and that is not the highest and best necessary use. I don't know if that's one that Evers vetoed or not, but we as a village, when we were talking about that, we're not excited about that particular bill.
Yeah, well, that one wouldn't help you guys. I think that was one aimed more for some of the bigger municipalities, as I recall. It's been a little while, and yeah. So, but anyway, I'll certainly keep an eye out, and and if you guys have ideas on things that could help, I'm all ears on that too. But it's a huge issue, obviously. Boy, you guys in Sister Bay, I mean, you've been hopping for the last few years, huh? I mean, Sister Bay is, of all the areas in the county, I think you guys have seen the biggest growth and
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Our sales tax, our Pratt, everything, room tax. It's been crazy.
Yeah. So I guess it's good, but it's also brings some difficulties with it, huh?
Unintended consequences.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. So.
Well,
Anything else, you guys?
thank you personally for having those difficult conversations and being two people who are on opposite sides of the aisle, but having intelligent and conversation. I appreciate that.
Well, honestly, I'm perfectly happy. I enjoy talking to anybody about issues as long as people can be civil. And so, yeah, I appreciate that too. So anybody else have any other questions or?
I have nothing.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Joel. We really greatly appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah. Anytime. And again, if you guys have, things that you see coming up, that now's a good time to bring them forward. If you see things that could be helpful for your community, happy to look into it. So.
And
Thank
that's
you.
great to know, because maybe, Rob, we should put that as an agenda item for our next meeting, just an open conversation on any thoughts that any staff or village trustee might have that we may be able to shuffle along to Joel.
That sounds good, and that'll be our duly noted under business item 2 once we progress to it.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Done
very
with me
much,
then?
Joel.
Okay.
We really
Thank you,
appreciate
Joel.
it.
Thank you.
Good talking to you guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, moving on to business item number 2, matters to be placed on a future agenda referred to a committee for the next board meeting. Open conversation on any topics to forward to Representative Kitchens.
Okay.
Right, Denise?
Yep, just open conversation. Yeah. I
Okay,
mean, he is there representing all of us. So if we can come up with something that we could use some help on, and timing is right. I actually think that we should, try to schedule one of these once or twice a year with him. I found it interesting and informing, frustrating, but I think it was good.
I think it was good too. And
Great.
Well, no, as long as there's some of the board members online. Did you want to talk about that alternate board meeting date or not? That we discussed at Parks?
Julie is working that issue,
Okay,
so we're gonna let her continue to work it,
okay,
and then we'll go from there.
okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna let her take the lead on that she wanted to.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, anyone?
Nope.
Okay, at 7:18 PM, I will motion that we adjourn.
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Yeah.
you.